of the mentors within here at Texas United Realty. And today we're going to be focusing on adding listings for sale or for lease. I think I hear someone's background noise. Lawrence, can you mute your phone, please? Thank you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So the agenda for tonight is adding listings for sale, adding listings for lease, managing photos like add, edit, descriptions, deleting photos off of your listing, and adding PDF attachments as well. There's a lot of you guys at the beginning of the year where you're going to be, I'm sure you're networking and what have you, and eventually you're going to get a client to list a house either for sale or for lease. So this is going to be a good informative class to get you started on that. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to be doing a demo example. So like that we can kind of get started within Matrix MLS. So in this example, we have a client has a rental house in MLS already, and they have decided to also put it up for sale as well. In this scenario, things are not doing really well on the rental side, and they're like, well, let's see if we can get it for sale as well. So I already have a lease that I already have set up, and we're going to use that as an example. In order to add or edit a listing, you have to click on the add edit, which is next to the search, adjacent to the search, to invoke the add edit, and then we click on add new. So we're going to be doing that. And what we're going to be doing on this example is there's many ways, well, there's really a couple ways of creating a listing. One of them is actually to do a search of the street number and the street name that you're going to be creating the listing from. Another one that I like to use a lot, which I do, especially with my investors, is I like to copy from existing listing. So in this particular scenario, I mentioned that they already have a lease, so they want to put it for sale. And I don't want to be copying all this data back, the different type of data input that you have to produce, like rooms and all that. So a real neat feature that Matrix MLS has is this copy feature, copy from existing listing. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to do another example where we're actually going to enter a listing. So like I mentioned before, you click on add edit from the Matrix MLS. So make sure you're in the home page if you're following me. You can click on add edit. And then system's a little slow here. And then you click on add new. And then what we're going to do is, like I mentioned, is this particular client wants to sell the property. So the selections you have here is single family, add edit, or a townhouse, condo, or a lot. And you have to select which form that we're going to be using. Since it's a rental and he wants to sell it, we're going to click on the single family, add edit. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And then, like I mentioned before, is there's a couple ways of searching for the property. Again, you can type in the street number, street name, city, what have you, and you can click on the search. But in this particular example, for this demo, we're going to do this copy from existing listing. So we're going to click on that. One thing I like about this copy from existing listing, and once you start adding more and more listings, you're going to like it because it's a way of copying a lot of repetitive information that you're going to be needing to use, and you don't have to, retype it in. So there's several ways of searching for that existing listing to copy from. You can actually do a search through this search form and find it. Normally what I do is I look for the MLS number, and the MLS number for the rental side is this number, 800-86642. So that's the rental side. Remember, I'm going to create a house for sale, not for rent, because it's already there. So we're going to click on Fill Form. What Fill Form does is, what it's doing there is invoking is grabbing all the data from the existing listing of the rental and populating the fields, which is a real neat feature. As you can see here, it already kind of populated a lot of the features from the original MLS of the rental, except of course it's leaving some things blank because we're going to be selling the property. Now you'll notice that there's a lot of yellow fields, and then there's some white fields. The yellow fields are mandatory, so you have to fill them in. They cannot stay blank. The ones that are in white can stay blank. So whenever you're preparing a listing on MLS, you have to at least fill out the yellows. Again, whatever the agreement that you already have signed with the owner, from the listing agreement, you put in the data. So if you're selling it for, 100 and, well, we'll say 200,000. You're selling the house for 200,000. Type it in there. The list date. Now the list date is when you want it to go live on the system of MLS. So that would be the current date. Now one thing I noticed whenever you're entering a listing on MLS is it does not allow you to put a future date in here. So if you're thinking about, hey, it's not ready to go live yet, just put in the date, but you're going to have to save it as incomplete. In other words, you can't make it live. It's not going to allow you to. So that might cause an error. The expiration date. What this date involves is more, what does the listing agreement contain? You'll have a listing agreement already signed between you and the seller. So in there, that's what you copy, is whatever is the agreement. Now in this particular example, I already have the rental, and we're selling it. So here I would answer with a yes, because I am also for lease. Okay. The price at lot value only. What this means is there's a house that is not livable anymore, more of a demolish situation, and you're really selling the property, even though it's got a house on it, but it's not livable. You're selling it at lot value, and so you would say yes in this particular example. I mean, if it's applicable. Okay, and then you have that additional information. So let's go ahead and click on map information. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. You'll notice here at the top, it looks like arrows going towards from left to right. That's sort of what it's an indication to go ahead and fill out the form that way. There's several arrows that you have to follow. So, one is the listing information, the other one's the map information and property information, and so on and so forth, all the way to the end. Okay. One thing that's real neat about this particular part, this map information, I know it looks a little complicated, especially the fields at the bottom. You don't have to worry about all this kind of stuff. All you have to do here in this particular page is just click on Get Lat/Long from Address. And that's going to get the latitude and longitude of the particular property. And once you do that, it's going to say, hey, is this right? Here's the map of where it's located, and you can say, yeah, that's pretty accurate. So that, as far as this page right here, the map information, that's all you have to do. Just click on Get Lat/Long from Address, and there's nothing else to do. Property information, that's the next third step in populating this listing. So the property information here, it's building square feet. Of course, remember, it's already been pre-filled because it grabbed it from the original rental that I had. Again, we're going to do another demo for something, when to fill it in. But for right now, in this example, and then the square feet source. Normally, the building square feet is from an appraisal district. You can go into HCAD and then it grabs it from there. But you have the choice of saying, okay, if it was an appraisal that was done and they updated the building square feet, then you would select appraisal. If it's a new build or a builder or what have you that build it, or there was a build out, of some sort, then you would select builder. And if the seller's telling you, no, the measurements are this, then you would select seller. So, but you have to pick one of them. Again, like I mentioned to you before, if it's yellow, you have to select. You cannot leave it blank. Okay. And then there's some other informational, like, is this new construction? Yes or no. There are some builders that will go and build from scratch. They'll demolish, especially in the heights and in those areas, they'll demolish the old houses and build brand new houses, or I call them mini mansions sometimes. And if it's a new construction, you would select yes here, and then additional information. Okay. And the more information you populate this particular section, the better for searches for our consumers that are looking for houses. So it's always good to provide additional selections. In particular, of course, you have to answer the ones in yellow boxes. But if there's more information that you can provide, like if they have a microwave, a dishwasher, disposal, what type of countertop does it have? The consumers out there are doing searches a lot, and the more information you provide here, the better your listing will probably appear in their search criteria. So that's one thing that I really advise, is the more information you select, the better. Okay. Rooms. Again, whenever you go to a listing appointment and you're starting to take pictures, of course, you're going to be also taking measurements of the bedrooms, especially the bedrooms. That's the priority or mandatory. But you can also take measurements of others, like the kitchen and living rooms and what have you, studies. But here's where you would type it in. You click on, if this was a 5-bedroom house, for example, you would just click this button called More, and then you just add it. They add the rest of the rooms and measurements. If you don't have any more, you can just click Delete. You tell it what floor is located. Is it on the first floor or second floor? I didn't know if there was houses on the 4th floor, but anyway, probably for condos maybe. And then the description, what are they, master bedroom, what have you. Now, one tip that is really important is to stay conservative with the measurements of the rooms. You don't. In other words, if the room is 14.5 inches, don't round up. It's best to round down. Entonces, so if the room, like I said, if it's 14.5, then say 14. It's best to be more conservative. So that one advice is to go ahead and do that. It's just to round down. Okay. Then the next arrow says financial information. So here's where you would tell it, if they're purchasing, if the seller's accepting cash, or FHA or conventional loan, financing considered would be in this box. What type of disclosures that you're providing, if it's in a MUD district, if you're the owner agent, you need to disclose that. If it's a short sale, what have you. Also, if there's a HOA, normally a lot of us sell when there's a homeowners association. You would select, yes for HOA, and then what's the name of the management company, and their phone number. So that's important to put in there. Is there a maintenance fee? As far as, is it mandatory? And what's the cost, and what's the demand? When is it due? annually? Is it monthly? What have you? Another thing is the taxes. It's important to put taxes. I know in my experience, buyers are really smart shoppers, and they're always asking, hey, what's the tax rate? What are the taxes for that were paid last year? So that's important for you to put this information in. You can get that from the Realist, the tax records, HCAT. Just make sure you get it from that data. Do not make up any numbers here. I always like to put the tax rate as well, because the tax rate whenever a buyer's buying the house, they'll use the tax rate to determine what the taxes are going to be. Okay. Showing information. So showing information is a way of communicating with other realtors how to schedule a showing for your listing. So this is really important that you determine how the buyer agents are going to communicate with you. Now, some of us will, like it to send us a text, or some of us don't mind a phone call, or some of us are too busy. We're out there selling. We're the top selling producers, and we use, centralized showing. I don't know if you guys have heard of centralized showing, but that's one of the main huge companies that a lot of us realtors use to schedule appointments. There's no charge for the buyer agent. There's only charge for the listing agent. But you can select here centralized showing, which is showing service. And if you're going to be using centralized showing, and of course then put the phone number of that. But if you're the ones that are going to receiving the phone call, then you put agent. And then the directions, you have to be very specific. I usually tell my students is pretend that you're telling a friend, hey, the party's here. So be very specific, turn left on this street, then make a right. If there's something that, if the roads are like rural areas, maybe you can say put landmarks, so just be very specific, because you don't want to lose a deal if it's really hard to get to, or the buyers don't have any idea, or they get lost, for example, and you don't want that to happen. So try to be very descriptive of the directions, and then showing instructions. What do you want the buyer agent to be aware of? You want them to accompany the buyers, and of course you should always be checking that. You don't want the buyers to go by themselves. Is there an appointment requirement, and do you want them to leave a business card? Is there control access, like, gated community? And then what's really, really important is, where's the lockbox located? There's going to be, I don't know if all of y'all already experienced this, but we show 9, 7, 10 houses, and we schedule them because we want them to pick one of them that day, and we don't want to be going, where's the lockbox located? At least here, oh, it's on the back, oh, it's on the front, oh, it's on the left, oh, it's on the right side. Sometimes the lock boxes are hanging off of a water faucet, on the side of the house. And also, is it a Supra? If it's not a Supra, then and we know it's a combination, a combo box, we call it. So another thing that might happen to you is the owner might tell you, hey, go ahead and put it on MLS, make it live, but I'm still working on it, and it's kind of dangerous to go into the house right now. I just need to clean up, or there's some kind of instruction like that. And you can click on temporarily no showings. That way you can still get the phone calls, and maybe you can even schedule them and put them in a batch, so like that you can then call them back and go, okay, now y'all can go after this day. So that's something to also be aware of. So try to communicate as much as possible through here, because this will prevent realtors, buyer agents from calling you all the time, or texting you or emailing you going, hey, where's the lockbox? Or hey, how do I schedule an appointment? The more you put in here, the less they're going to call you. So that's the way I kind of think about things. And then of course you put the commissions, buyer agent compensation. One thing about I get questions asked about this variable compensation, like what is that? This is used whenever there's the commissions are different depending on the situation. I mainly do that. I mainly use this a lot with investors, because investors will tell me, the ones that I work with, hey, I'll pay X amount of dollars or X amount percentages if there's two agents, a buyer and a listing agent, but I'm only going to pay you, X amount of percentages if there's no buyer agent. So it fluctuates depending on the situation. So I usually, in that case, I would put variable compensation, yes, because there is a change in the compensation. Of course, this is all written in the listing agreement as well. And then the last one is remarks and tour links. Here's where you can put the public remarks. Here's the public remarks is what the buyer sees when they're doing searches. So it's public. And here's where you would put, your fancy words about gorgeous house, or, house located in a beautiful, Katy area, or Cinco Ranch, or the Woodlands, that kind of stuff. So here's where you do the selling, you can say, the pizzazz, if you like. And then the agent remarks are private. So here's where it's almost like you're talking directly to the buyer agent. Well, assume you are talking to the buyer agent and you're saying this is what the instructions are. So for example, let's just say that your seller is still occupying the property, and they don't want any showings until they only want to show the house Monday through Friday from 10 to 5 or 10 to 6, and then Saturdays from 12 to 6 or something like, there's some kind of specific things like that. Of course, you're going to tell centralized showing this if you're going to use them, but it's also helpful to put that in the agent remarks. So like that, no one's going, hey, can we see the house at 8? And you're like, my agent remark says no. So anyway, and then lastly, you can add, virtual tour links and other things from, what you have set up for the house. Now, one thing that when I'm working with new agents, they always have this fear that they're going to break something in MLS when they're trying to create a listing. And I tell all of them, don't worry about it. Matrix, I spoke to a developer personally when I was learning Matrix, and I asked him, I asked the developer, can we break Matrix? And he said no. So I was like, okay, that means I'm going to try to break it. And me having a computer software background, I was trying to break it. And no, I have not been able to break it, the system. So when you're entering this listing, you can save it as incomplete. In other words, it won't go live. But let's just say you make a mistake and you click the Submit Listing button. The Submit Listing button is the one that says, go ahead, make it live. Well, it's not going to work because it's going to give you an error, meaning that there's things that you probably forgot to fill in. Now, if it is perfect, of course, it's going to go live. Keep in mind, you can always edit it, so you don't have to worry about, oh, it went live, now what do I do? You can edit the listing, so don't feel like it's the end of the world. But one thing that I always like to use first is this Validate button. The Validate button, before you use the Submit Listing, it does a check of everything on this forms, all those arrows that we clicked, each one of them, and it says, oh, there's a couple problems, and it'll indicate them in red, as you can see here at the top. And of course, here, see how the map information is not red, so that means that it's okay. The room here is not incorrect, so it's okay. But the other ones do have errors. So go ahead and click on the tab with the exclamation point, the red exclamation point. And so, for example, here I'm doing property information. I'm going to say, okay, well, what's the problem? Well, so far I'm looking like, oh, everything looks fine to me. Oh, I see. And it's going to tell you right next to the box uh, there's going to be like a red indicator here with the exclamation. It's going to tell you something you need to fill it in. So, just kind of keep that in mind. Don't have a fear that, oh, I'm going to mess up something. Go ahead, just click validate. If you need to, one thing as another tip is whenever you're going to be working on a listing and it's getting close. So, for example, you still have to go and take pictures, or you're waiting on some other things to happen from the seller. I would suggest go ahead and creating the listing just to kind of get it prepped. You don't have to make it live, and it can be incomplete for a while. So there's no time limit. Another thing that's real neat is right here it says required fields left blank or errors found. You can click that and it'll give you a list of everything that's missing or not that is required. So but that's pretty much it. Again, whenever you're at the listing appointment, try to gather as much information as possible. Like room measurements. You're going to take pictures, or you're going to use a professional to take the pictures as well. And you can then save it as incomplete. So what I was going to do here, one thing that I really like about Matrix MLS that allows you to do that is if you can click on the save as incomplete, it actually generates an MLS number, and you can actually click on it, and it almost looks like it's an actual real Matrix MLS. So here's the MLS number. See how it says listing as saved as incomplete? You can actually click on it, and it'll show you the Matrix MLS listing. What I like to do when I'm working on listings is actually I like to print it out. Print this stuff out. This is just remember, keep in mind, it's incomplete. It's not live. And it almost looks like it's ready to go. It's real. But I like to print this out and take it back whenever you have to go back, and you're let's just say the owner says, oh yeah, I'm going to install a dishwasher and a microwave, and you have to go and take pictures. Take this with you, this form, and then you can kind of start going, okay, what else is available for this house? And this is sort of like a cheat sheet you can use. Now, zip forms and .loop do provide a document for inputting this data. You can actually print that out. I think it's a really long document. I prefer taking this Matrix MLS with me and then just kind of going, okay, let me see what kind of bedrooms, are the bedrooms right measurements. Also, I usually show the public remarks to the owner and ask them, hey, any verbiage do you would like me to use? And then because they know their house better than you do. Maybe they can mention something like, oh, it's near the golf carts, or there's a recreation center, or around the corner, or it's close to I-10 and Fry Road, or what have you. So you can work together as a team. So like that you can market the property. Okay. So we're going to move to another demo. Just wanted to pause a little bit and see if there's any questions before we move on to the next. So what we did, just summary of the first, is copying an existing listing using the copy from existing listing feature. Like that, we don't have to duplicate all our work and efforts again. Okay, so that's the first demo. Okay, so now we're going to do the second demo. The second demo is just, hey, there's a client needs to rent his house out and put it on MLS. Okay, so that one we're not doing anything as far as copying. We're going to actually search for the house. Okay, so I usually like to start at the home page. And so the client now says, hey, I got a house, want you to rent it out. Again, you click on add edit. And then click on add new. Oh, just before we move further, if you ever want to go back and edit the listing, you can click on edit existing, or remember that one that we did right now, the incomplete. It's right here. It says it's got the letter I indicator, I being incomplete. All these are active, and it'll tell you if it's land, LND, residential, RNT means rental. So, but I like pending here. This one I have a contract on this already, so that's why it says pending, not active. But I just means it's inactive. Okay. So we're going to click on Add New. So this time our demo is, hey, we're starting from scratch. We're not copying anything. It's plain Jane. So the choices you have when you're doing an Add New, again, is, if it's a single family, if you're going to sell a single family home, or if it's a townhouse, or if it's a lot, multifamily, country. If you're doing a rental, you click on rental. So in this case, we're going to rent it. So we're going to click on rental, add edit. Again, we're back to that screen again where you can either copy or... Oh, another thing that's important is make sure you're in the right county whenever you're doing add, edit, or really add. Make sure you're in the right county, because if not, it's not going to work. You can type in tax account number. You can type owner's last name, first name. I don't really like to use these fields because it's harder to search for a particular property. My recommendation is just type in the address, and that's pretty much it, because it finds it faster. Another thing, just another tip, is don't use street or drive or any of those. It's always gonna tell you that it can't find it. So just leave the plain Jane name of the street. Okay, and then you click on search. So here what it's doing is actually accessing the database of like the tax records database, because what you're trying to do is you're going to try to fill in the rest of the information, like all the tax information and other criteria of that property. So here it found the property. If it hadn't found the property, it would have given you an error like, hey, can't find it, and then you have to keep on searching for the property. And it tells you who the owners are, and this is one of my investors, IAC Investments. Okay, once you're done, this is the tax record that it found. Yes, that's the one that I want. Here's the tax account number as well. I click on where it says fill, and fill means to grab all the data from the tax records and populate the screen that I'm going to be using to list the property. And it's similar to what we were just on just a little bit earlier. Okay, so it populated most of the information, but you still have to type in other additional information, of course. List type, of course, here's, when you're doing the contract for the listing, is an exclusive right to sell. What's the list price that you're going to be selling this property for? And that's already an agreement between you and the seller. The list date, like I mentioned before earlier. Property class, it's a single family. Now right here, since this is a rental, we're in the rental section. It's asking, are you also selling it? So here's where you would put in also for sale, yes, and then the MLS number for that and the price. That way there's a connection, and everybody's aware of that. The legal subdivision, whenever you're wanting to fill out fields that are in the white field colors, like this one, you're going to see some hyperlinks or some lookup tables. Like, for example, if you want to look at the legal subdivision for this property, you would click this lookup subdivision, and it brings up a dialog box. Now, I'm familiar with the subdivision because I live in the subdivision, so it's going to be an easy search for me. But you can type in, see if it allows me to do this. You can type in the first word of the subdivision. Now, and this is a search bar, so you can type in the. Now, you're going to notice that it brings up a lot of subdivisions, and you're wondering, well, why? Well, what it's doing is the word 3, because I live in 3 Lakes East. The word 3, what it's doing here is it's searching for every single subdivision with the word 3. So, for example, here it says CMC Properties 3. This is McGregor 43, and so on. So that's why there's many of them, because it's looking for the word 3. So. Which is pretty helpful. So in this particular case, it's 3 Lakes East. So you can do that and do a run search, and it'll populate it. You can also click on this little zoom button next to school district, for example, and type in, what school district is located. You can do that. So there's many ways of populating these fields. Some have this zoom or lookup subdivision or what have you. Now, all this data here, this tax account number and key map and census tract, I know most of you guys, or you're probably real young, y'all probably might not even know what a key map is. But anyway, this is an old way of when we used to be able to determine location of a property. But all this information was populated from the tax records. So. Again, you follow the same thing, the same concept of arrows, going to each arrow again. Again, keep in mind you're not going to break the system. So go ahead and be confident in entering the data. Now this one's going to be blank, because keep in mind, remember the first demo, we had it already copied from an existing list, MLS number. This one's plain Jane, so it's empty. And again, just click on this get lat long from address, and it will populate for you. And that's all you have to do in this page. There is nothing else to do in this page. Once you do that, you're done. So, and then again, property information is the next arrow. Trying to see if there's anything else in this screen that I can show you. Oh, so in this particular case, there's a button here called Lease and Additional Information. Since this is a listing for a lease, it's wanting to know additional lease information, which is what the tenants, when they're doing searches, they're wondering, oh, are pets allowed? Here's where you would put that information. Is smoking allowed? Normally it's always no. Are pets allowed? Usually, us realtors, we always say case by case. The majority of us say case by case. The case by case is more like we have a control where we're very flexible, depending. If you say yes, then you're kind of forced to always accept. But I highly recommend using case by case basis. And then pet deposit is required, yes. Is approval required, yes. Approval requirements, I usually put like 3 times the rent, colored copies of driver's license, 1 or 2 current months, paycheck stubs. We normally write things like good rental history, good credit history. I have seen some realtors put in a hard credit score, like they might say 580 or above or 600 or above. It all depends on what the landlord wants or requirements are. But I always like to leave that open, so like that there's a flexibility. Because what if the credit score's, instead of 580, it's 578? They might not even say, oh no, they want 580, and they might even ask to even look at the house. So I prefer just to make general statements like good rental history, good credit history. Like that there's flexibility in determining what, hopefully that there's a showing. You want it to be a showing. And then application fee. Normally landlords charge different fees. This is for the background check, that the tenant verification that they have to conduct. you'll see fees like $35, $45, $55 per person, and so on. So I think that's all I wanted to do here. Again, showing information is really important to learn how to communicate with buyer agents, because they look at the MLS, and it's always important for you guys to make sure that you fill it in as much information as possible. So like that, you know, like if you're, a lot of us are full-time realtors, a lot of us are part-time realtors, and you know, and if you're using centralized showing, make sure you have that set up here. So okay, and again, you can save this as incomplete. You know, you can do a validate like I mentioned before to check to see if there's anything missing, and if you want to make it live, you click on submit listing and then it goes live. Okay. Before we move on to the next topic, any questions? I know it's a lot to remember, and when you have your first listing, you're going to go, oh, what did Fernando say again? So of course I'm recording this session, so you can always go back to it. All right. So now we're going to add pictures. This is fun, and I don't mean it sarcastically. Okay, so we're going to add some pictures, and the way to add pictures is you click on Manage Photos. So let me see if there's anything else I need to add here. Okay, so adding pictures, you can upload multiple photos at once, and by uploading multiple photos, some of us have Windows computers and others have the iMac computers. For Windows users, you use the control key and then you have to click each individual picture. Like that, you can add like to 5 or 10 pictures at one time. If you're on an iMac, you use the command key and then you select each one too. So either one, depending on what computer you're using. And the max is 33 pictures. So, and then there's it's kind of interesting the way Matrix names these the headers for these pictures. They call them slots, SLOT, which I have no idea why they do that. But the primary slot is the main picture that's going to be showing up whenever someone's looking at Matrix MLS. So and usually the primary slot is the front of the house. So don't make that the kitchen, for example, unless the kitchen's gorgeous, and that's the selling point, then you can do that. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and add pictures. Oh no. Disappeared here. There we go. Okay. It scared me a little bit. So I'm going to start again from the home page. And so when you're doing pictures, either some of you are going to be using a professional to take pictures. Whenever you get them, make sure you save them in a particular folder. I usually have folders for each property. So, and I usually call the folder MLS Pics. So make sure that you save it. If you're taking your own pictures, again, create a folder and put them in one. Don't put them on your desktop, and because then you're going to get all confused. So we're going to do add edit again, and we're going to pretend to add some pictures. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just modify a listing that I already have, and we'll use in the same rental property that I have already. So we're going to modify that. Now the last two topics we're going to be talking about is manage photos and manage attachments. So before we move on, and we're in this system here, if you need to change a price, well, first, if you need to edit the listing, you can click on edit. If you need to change the price, you click on price. If you need to conduct an open house, you click on open house. Whenever you have a contract, here's where you change the statuses of the contracts. Option pending, pending continue to show, pending, or it's leased. If you need to withdraw it, or you need to terminate. So all these are options you can select for your listing depending on the situation that's happening at the time. You can also adjust the expiration date. Let's just say that on the 31st, nothing's happened, and you and the seller go, hey, let's list it for 2 more months. You sign an amendment to the listing to extend the expiration date, and then you can change it here to continue to extend the expiration date. Okay, so let's click on Manage Photos. So the Manage Photos allows you to import the pictures. And so these already have pictures already in here. And one thing that whenever you're dealing with pictures is, now you cannot edit the picture here and change, like if they're dark or something, you can't do anything here. The only thing you can do on this within MLS Add Edit is you can only put a description. You can add a description here at the bottom, like dining room, or you can put something fancy as far as verbiage, but you can't. Back in the old days, we used to be able to edit pictures and kind of make them darker or lighter or what have you, but now they removed that feature. So you have to use either paintbrush or some other mechanism to do that, or if you're using a professional, hopefully they deliver it with that's not too dark, for example. Another thing, that the flow of the pictures too, that's really important. When I look at pictures, sometimes I see like it might be the house, the front of the house, then it might be the back of the house, then it might be the kitchen, and then it might be a restroom, and I'm like, whoa. Whenever you rearrange the pictures, first you arrange them by going to the header of that picture, and then you can click and drag and move it around, but you have to touch the header, okay? And rearrange them where it's a flow, like this particular house, the front, and then you go into this dining room area, then it's the kitchen, then it's the living room, and then when you climb upstairs, it's the first room, and then there's a restroom, so on and so forth. You understand what I'm saying. So try to make it a flow of almost like you're actually showing them a tour of the house, and they're actually walking virtually through the tour. Okay, so in order to load pictures, you click on this browse button, and then it'll invoke the folders that you have on your computer. Again, make sure that you're pretty organized as far as where the pictures are located. And then once you find the pictures, then you can then, like I put everything in the public folder here. So for this particular house, I have a folder, and I usually call it MLS Pics. So these are my contracts here. And see how it says MLS Pictures? And those are all the pictures that I have. And normally JPEG is what we use for pictures. And then you just click, click, click. And remember, like I mentioned earlier, if it's a Windows computer, use the Control key and you click the individual pictures. If it's a iMac computer, you can use the command function and then also do the click. And then you click on Open, and then it imports them. And that's really about it. Of course, there's not going to import them in order and in any orders, but with that you can do the orders there. If you want to delete some of these pictures, you can actually click on this little boxes here, and you can say delete, and it'll delete that. It'll remove that picture. Okay, and then once you're done, you click on save. Okay, but before we move on to the next and last topic, any Questions on pictures?
Is how do you get these things to move? I have help
Okay.
moving different.
Yeah, and that's a very common question, and it's a real okay. So what you do is just watch my mouse, and you're gonna notice that it's got a little finger, right? It's a finger pointing, and then you move it, and you see how there's crossbars, and then you click on it, and don't let it go. If you're using a Windows computer, click on the left mouse button. You click on it, and then you can drag it to the spot where you want it to go, and it'll shift everything and move things over. Okay, see how it just moved it?
I've moved them, but I swear it's on accident when I get them to move. I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best, and sometimes it does it, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so
Yeah,
you kind of you put it where the number thing is, and it'll give you that little arrow.
right. Like for
Okay.
example, if I want to move this 13 between these two,
Yes.
I'll grab, but make sure you're touching the title of that
Okay.
picture.
Yeah, I guess I was grabbing in the wrong place, and sometimes I accidentally got the right place.
Exactly. And then you see how it's now, I'm doing this slowly so you can see how I'm between now. Now I'm going to let go of my mouse and see how it pushed it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So make sure that you're in the cross. If you do this and move it,
Yeah.
if you do
It
this,
moves, and then
it'll
it goes
mess it up
back.
really big time. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it just keeps going back, and it's like, oh.
I know. That's a good question, and it's a very common question. So don't feel bad. The first time I learned Matrix, I was saying many bad words, especially in this part. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? That was a good question, by the way. All right. And then the last one is adding attachments. Yay. Um, now, make it a habit as a realtor to make sure, like especially if you're selling a house, get the seller's disclosure. Well, you should do it anyway. Seller's disclosure, the MUD, the HOA document, you know, the survey if you have one. Make sure that they're signed by the seller first and then post them on your MLS listing. That way, whenever a buyer agent is going to submit an offer, they already have the required documents, additional documents, the addendums, and they'll have them already signed, you can say, and executed. And also, it helps with you not having to negotiate. So, for example, in the HOA addendum, there's a section in there that says what's the cost of the HOA transfer fee, what's the agreement, and we normally put $150 or 200 or 250. I think it's paragraph D. Well, if you don't do the HOA, guess what the buyer agent's going to do? They can put $1. you know, why not? You didn't fill it out. Of course, that's not fair, but you know what I'm saying. And because that's what I do. If I don't see an HOA, I'm gonna put the lowest number, like $100, you know, for the transfer. And they're like, no, it's supposed to be 250. Well, I didn't see nothing on your MLS listing. So just kind of make that a habit. And the way to post, um, so now we're on the section of adding attachments. Uh, the way to post adding attachments is you click on manage attachments. And while we're waiting for this to load, attachment types, you're going to have two of them, two sets. One is agent, which is private, only agents can view or download. And the other one's public, all can view on the World Wide Web. Okay, so be very careful what you post. If it's not supposed to be for the
If you have
public,
a rental, if you have a rental and you want people to be able to get the rental app off of there, can you make that public,
yeah,
or does
then
it
you can
only?
make it. Then you can make it public. Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good question, by the way. So you can add attachments. It says here 30 megabytes max. And then to add an attachment, you choose a file, the attachment type, like I just mentioned earlier, you have 2 agents, 1 seller disclosure and 1 agent only. Then you got the other publics. And you can pick a category if you would like, or just click on public by itself. And then you click on choose file, and then it'll search through your folder of your computer, and then you pick the particular attachment, So we're just going to pick this PDF file just as a demo. And then once you pick that file and you give it the description of what that file is about, is it agent or public, then you click on upload, and then it will show up on your MLS as an attachment. So make sure that you are aware of how you're placing it inside MLS. Okay, agent only or public. Those are the only 2. Now this part, remember I mentioned that the other one will, when you click on validate, it'll tell you, hey, these are the errors. This part is not going to give you no error message. You're in full control. So if you place it in the wrong place, then guess what? It's in the wrong place. The system's not going to tell you, hey, you're not supposed to do that. So just be very aware of loading what you're loading in this particular manage attachments. Okay. Any questions on the attachments part? And yes, it can be any file type. I've tried Microsoft Word, I've tried PDF. They all seem to work. I haven't seen one that doesn't accept it yet. Okay, so some tips. We're towards our end of our session. Some tips. You can save your listing as incomplete and come back to finish editing. So again, I'll reiterate, whenever you're working with the listing, go ahead and start the listing process of adding a listing. It's not going to hurt the system. It can be incomplete for, days and days. I don't want to say months and months. And go ahead and start working on it. If you have a mentor, go ahead and work with them to make sure that it's looking good. You can copy an existing listing. I use this all the time, especially with investors, because they'll sometimes want me to sell a house, sometimes they want me to rent a house, sometimes they want me to do both. And so I use this feature a lot, the copy an existing listing. Now, the copy existing listing will not copy the pictures. It will only copy the data. Okay? It won't even copy the attachments either. So the copy an existing listing is only for the content of the MLS matrix listing, but not the attachments and not the pictures. So,
well, isn't that because those pictures might not belong to you?
Correct. Correct. It belongs to the same office, but correct. It might not be. Now, you cannot copy existing listings from another office. In other words, any other broker, you cannot do a copy an existing.
Okay. Could you not copy it and then, of course, change your broker information? You can't use all the MLS information and then just change your broker information?
It doesn't cross over from one broker to another broker.
Okay.
Yeah, it does cross over from one agent.
They're always yours.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you're probably going to be the only one using it because you're the same person. When searching the address, don't use the drives and the courts and the avenues. Don't use that. Just simple name. Another thing that I've gotten some of my students tell me, "Hey Fernando, I put a picture there, but I still don't see it." I go, "Oh, well, Matrix updates every 15 minutes the database. So if you post a picture now, it's probably not going to show up now. You might have to wait 15 minutes. It depends on where the cycle of that 15 minutes is. It might be 5 minutes that you see it, but it does it in batches because Matrix is such a huge system that every 15 minutes it does updates depending on when you landed on that cycle. So just have patience is what I'm trying to say. Don't get panicky and go, oh, I put a bunch of pictures and they're not showing up. Just remember there's a cycle that it has to update. So be patient with the system. Again, you won't break the system up. It's got the validate feature. As long as you answer all the yellows, and if there's still things that are missing, it's going to tell you. So it does contain a fail-safe system. So hopefully this was informative for you guys. I know you're going to start, this is the year to start getting really busy. And hopefully you get a lot of listings and you can start. After a while, you're going to become really, really comfortable with creating listings. But in the beginning, it's going to be a little bit chaotic because you're like, well, what am I supposed to do again? So again, just whenever you create a new listing, you have to click on add. Just remember that to invoke it to get started. And also, one thing that I like to do is, especially if it belongs to somebody else in particular, I like to always see, was this on MLS before, this particular property? And I'll go and I'll type in the address and see if it's there. If it is there and it shows up as Matrix MLS and it was sold, 5 years ago or whatever, I'll print it out and take it with me. That way I can kind of reiterate with the seller, hey, does this still apply? Does this still apply? And I can also look at the house to make sure that it still has the granite countertops like it mentioned 5 years ago, or it still has, XYZ. So it's real helpful to do that. And then when you come back, then when you're doing an ad of the listing, you have your little notes. So you can do that. Okay. Any other questions before we wrap it up, guys? Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And go out and sell.